Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Louis Brightraven. I'm your host, Louis Brightraven, 30-year veteran writer, illustrator, editor, publisher of comic, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games. It is a Friday night. That means it is time for movie talk. And with me this week, once again, is my co-host, Monster Fan.
How you doing, Raven?
I'm doing okay. It's been kind of a busy week for everyone, I understand. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. This is our I Love Lucy Noir episode, featuring two films featuring the very talented Lucille Ball. Most people recognize her strictly for her comedic acting in I Love Lucy, and maybe if you're a science fiction fan, you recognize her as the person who green-lighted Star Trek, and we wouldn't have Star Trek without Lucille. So. Thank you for that. But we're going to talk about her earlier career when she was a movie starlet that most people don't really pay that much attention to for some reason. And he keeps getting calls.
Sorry, I'll silence that.
No, that's fine. It happens. But we got two films tonight, The Dark Corner and Lured, and we're going to talk about The Dark Corner first. So let's go ahead and do that. Pop Culture and North Free are in the house. So let's see what else is going on here. The Dark Corner was directed by Henry Hathaway with a screenplay by Jay Dratler and Bernard C. Schoenfeld based on a story that was published in Good Housekeeping by Leo Roston. Produced by Fred Colmar, starring Lucille Ball, Clifton Webb, William Bendix, Mark Stevens, Kurt Kruger, Kathy Downs, Reed Hadley, and Constance Collier. Production company, 20th Century Fox, distributed by 20th Century Fox, with a running time of 1 hour, 39 minutes. And it was released on May 8th, 1946. The genre is crime film noir with a budget of $1.2 million. It received a box office of only $1 million. We're going to talk about some trivia about this film first, I think. Oh, no, we got what it's about. Do you want me to read it or do you want to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay.
So we got private investigator Bradford Galt, played by Mark Stevens, has moved from San Francisco to New York to escape a troubled past. He blames his former partner Tony Jardine, played by Kurt Kruger, for his problems. Complicating matters, he is being hounded by New York Police Lieutenant Frank Reeves, played by Reed Hadley, and discovers that he is being followed by a thug in a white suit. After a little rough persuasion, the thug admits he has been hired by Jardine. Or was he? Galt suspects Jardine is trying to frame him for a murder, but it turns out that Jardine is just part of a wider-ranging conspiracy involving a wealthy art gallery owner, Hardy Cathcart, played by the inimitable Clifton Webb. Galt is a little too arrogant and sure of himself, and he is sort of out of his league, but with the aid of his sharp-witted secretary Kathleen, played by Lucille Ball, Galt is able to overcome all these obstacles and clear himself of the frame job.
North Free says he really likes the art collector in the movie, meaning Cathcart, I assume. Let's see. Okay, historical points of fact. Both Lucille Ball and Mark Stevens were both replacement cast members at the last moment. Originally, their roles would be played by Ida Lupino, who was a very famous and popular starlet of the era, and Fred MacMurray. Yes, that Fred MacMurray, later famous for The Absent-Minded Professor and My Three Sons. I can't imagine him being the lead actor in this film. I mean, as stiff as Stevens is in this film, it would have been turned into a comedy, I think. I don't know. Anyway, Lucille Ball was actually brought up by 20th Century Fox from MGM Studios, because remember, back in those days, actors were under a contract to Singular Studios. And she was in a legal dispute with 20th Pardon me, it should have been with MGM, not with 20th, over her contract. Stevens was Murray's replacement after two other actors were found to be unavailable, and the director, Henry Hathaway, was not at all happy with Stevens' performance. He would later say that The Dark Corner was not a successful film. It was dead. Mark Stevens never quite cut it. Too arrogant, too cocksure. It is very clear that he thought Stevens was the film's greatest weakness and the cause for the film's box office failure. Second point of fact was that Lucille Ball was going through business and personal relationship issues that were such of a matter that it was just so distracting that during filming, Hathaway would call her out on set to tell her to go back to her trailer and actually read the script. So I guess, she was not at her top form maybe in this film, which is kind of funny because most people who watch this film seem to think that she's the bright spot of the film. Hathaway seemed to have no love for Clifton Webb either. He would later describe Webb as an angel, but he never really was a good actor. He was a character. He was marvelous because he was so elegant. Such a contradictory statement was made after Webb's passing in 1966 while Hathaway was interviewed during his filming of Nevada Smith. The film's locations and settings included office buildings in Manhattan, the Bowery, and the 3rd Avenue L, but the arcade scenes were shot in Santa Monica, California. While the film was considered a box office flop at the time and not Hathaway's best film noir, that is widely considered to be The House on 92nd Street, this film and Lucille's performance in particular has garnered a highly respected status, an unsung classic of the genre. I didn't really know Lucy before I Love Lucy, so this is all new to me. And research is all discovery to me in this. So I find it fascinating that, because believe it or not, she had 67 films before this. And you're like, huh? And a lot of them she wasn't even credited for. So it was like quite interesting to learn that about her early career. What did you think of the facts that I presented?
Well, I think first that Mark Stevens is very weak in this movie. He's very flat, very hard boiled, but almost to the point of not being human. I mean,
yeah, it's one note. It's all one note.
It's one note the whole way through. And how a vivacious woman like Lucille Ball could fall in love with this board, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as very realistic.
Yes, that was kind of the interesting part about her performance in this, and we'll talk about that in a moment here. I think on the surface, it's a pretty straightforward film. Plot's okay. But it's not a whodunit like they suggested it was. We know who the whole time who did all the killing because we see it. That's not a whodunit. A whodunit, you don't see who actually does the killing, and you are with the person trying to figure out the crime. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. We didn't need to be spoon-fed in that regard. I think Hathaway was pretty spot on, and like you and I both, we agree. Stevens is just too generic, too one note. Has none of the sense of hauntedness or dread that a person who's already been wrongly imprisoned for killing someone, in a car accident that he didn't, actually commit. He didn't have enough desperation, in my opinion. As for Lucille Ball's portrayal of Kathleen, I do think she plays the role to the nines and is the best portrayed character overall. But her character's behavior is a bit hard to understand. Like you say, what does she see in Galt that she's sticking by him and falls in love with him and what? She flirts with him. She teases him. She mothers him. Is almost willing to do anything to protect him from being framed. And she regularly comes up with all the ideas that keep him going throughout the film. She is basically the whole motivator for him. Otherwise, he would just give up and go ahead, take me out, basically. Now, Clifton Webb, I can understand why Hathaway didn't like him necessarily in this film. He's chewing the scenery all throughout the film. But is it Clifton Webb's fault, or is it the lines of the film that are so damn cheesy? I don't know. I mean, think about this line. My love for you is the only malady I've contracted since the usual childhood diseases. I mean, that's just what a woman wants to hear, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a malady to you now? If this was an MST3K production, no doubt Tom Servo would be saying, well, obviously you aren't getting any venereal diseases, Grandpa. But it's, you got to admit that the character is a devious little bastard, and the character that he plays is quite smarter than the average criminal. He should get away with it. The only reason he doesn't is basically what happens, the twist at the end. But he should have gotten away with it. The taxi chase scene, and where Galt steals the cab and flees back to the cab's garage to get away from the cops. That was a little bit tame, I thought, of a scene. But this is 46, and they're not going to do crazy stuff with stunts at that time, I don't think, especially when they were doing it live, more or less in a real, New York at that time. So it wasn't like they set up the shows and shots these days. They get everybody off the streets, but so I think we can let that slide. The ending did come out pretty much as I expected. Since Cathcart didn't kill his wife like he should have done, once he knew that she was going to leave him, that she would ultimately kill him once she realized what he did to Jardine. But it was a nice touch at the very end where Cathcart's got Galt in the vault. If you look in the back of the vault, the picture that he bought that she's supposed to look like is opened and is looking at the whole scene from the background. And it's a subliminal note that tells you that Mary was hearing it from above. So it was like, that was a really nice play, I thought, in the film, in the cinematography. But I didn't like that they didn't say what happened to her after the fact. I was wondering if she was going to get charged for shooting and killing her husband, or does she get that, they're not going to charge her because she shot him in part to save Galt, or what? I thought that should have been addressed. It just wasn't. That was a kind of a major plot point to me. Does that bother you as well, or?
Now that you mention it, it does. I didn't really think about it before this. But yeah, they probably should have put a line in there or something that she's got a good attorney, or they're not going to charge her, or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what else. It's not a bad movie, but I can also see why it didn't get the box office at the time. But keep in mind what it was up against. It was going up against Boris Karloff's Bedlam, Roy Rogers' Rainbow Over Texas. It was going against The Virginian. The Postman Always Rings Twice. All these were already in theaters the week before. And then it had to compete against John Wayne and Without Reservations, The Cat Creeps with Lois Collier, and June Lockhart as a She-Wolf of London in the week afterwards. No wonder the film got buried, right?
Yeah.
When you got all that to compete against. Because you got to remember, in these times, a lot of these films had maybe 1 or 2 week runs at the most.
Yeah.
Because there was just, Hollywood was putting out so much stuff at the time. because we didn't have television at that time in the same way. So people went to the theater every week and they wanted something new every week. So it was pretty obvious there. But anyway, like I said, I thought this was one of her earliest roles, and it isn't. She'd already been in 67 films by the time of she did this part. And a lot of them were uncredited, and they're minor background roles, or she's an extra, but still, she was in those films. So that left me a little bit gobsmacked when I discovered that. And it does explain why she is able to carry the film as she does, as the character motivating Galt throughout the film. I don't know if this film would have been as good, though, if Ida Lupino had been cast. With her British flair and her... I think she wouldn't have put up with this bullshit. With the character. I don't think Kathleen would have... Her interpretation of Kathleen wouldn't have put up with Galt's whininess and give up attitude. I don't think it would have been played with the same interpretation. She'd been too snobby, I think. That's just my thinking. Knowing of what I know of Lupino's films. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Yes, we gotta go here. I give it a 3-star. What do you give it?
I give it a 2.5 or 3 stars.
Okay. And I do like my thing here. I decided, this is when the cop that's always chasing him down. Can I help you? I sew, cook, answer the phone, type and solve the crimes when my boss goes out and makes an ass of himself. That's basically the film in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. What I don't like about the film, in addition to some of the things you said, was Lucille Ball actually, there's several places in which she disappears for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. Like, he will say to her, go home and wait for my phone call. And then he does like 5 other things over the next 10 or 15 minutes.
Right.
And then he calls her, or she gets tired of waiting and goes looking for him. So,
right. Yeah,
it's really Mark Stevens' movie, and that's kind of unfortunate because it's a pretty flat performance, as I said. So,
yeah. 1.2 million was quite a big budget in 46, wasn't it? Not really. A lot of films were between 1 million and 1.5 in that era. So it was pretty standard rate. There was a lot of under budgeted films, of course, but you got to remember a lot of their budgets pertain to the length of the film too. A lot of these films in the 30s and 40s were less than an hour, with like 45 minutes to 50 minutes long, and so they got a little bit less budget. This was an hour and 42 minutes, I think, so it has a little bit bigger budget as a result.
I also wonder, and I didn't check this out, if Clifton Webb got this role based on his performance in Laura, which was probably his most famous role in that movie. And I think that was a year or two before this movie was released, if I'm not mistaken. So if that's the case, it
was 3 years before.
3 years, okay, because he plays like the same character. There's almost no chance. You could interchange the two characters.
Yeah, and believe it or not, the screenplay's by the same writer, Jay Dratler. So, yeah, that's not a surprise.
And I noticed you reported that the original story for this movie came from a story in Good Housekeeping.
Yep.
So I can't imagine any good story coming out of Good Housekeeping. So there we are.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, that's fair, I guess. Alrighty. The next film is Lured, 1947, directed by Douglas Sirk. Screenplay by Rio Roston, who wrote the story for Good Housekeeping. Here we go again. Produced by James Nasser and Hunt Stromberg, starring Lucille Ball, George Sanders, Charles Coburn, Boris Karloff, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Joseph Kalia, Alan Mowbray, and George Zucco. Production company Hunt Stromberg Productions, distributed by United Artists with an hour and 42-minute time. It's released September 5th, 1947. Crime film noir. There was no budget that I could find on it, but it only got a box office of $700,000, so it actually did worse in the box office than Dark Corner did.
Yeah,
and this is
that's unfortunate.
Yeah. And that is, well, we'll talk about what it goes up against in a minute, but the funny part of it is that this is considered a better film of the two. So it's odd that the box office was so much lower. Okay, what it's about. This is a remake of the 1939 French film Piegas, also known as Personal Column in the U.S. Sandra Carpenter, played by Lucille Ball, is an American who came to London to perform in a show, but now is working as a taxi dancer. We'll get into that in a minute. She's upset to find out that her friend and fellow dancer, Lucy Bernard, played by Tenny Chandler, is missing and believed to be the latest victim of the notorious poet killer who lures victims with ads in newspapers, personal columns, and then sends poems to taunt the police. Scotland Yard Inspector Harley Temple, played by Charles Coburn, believes the killer to be influenced by the 19th century French poet Charles Baudelaire. He asks if Sandra will be willing to work undercover to help find her missing friend and the killer. He sees how observant she is from firsthand and gives her a temporary police identification card and a gun, which, okay, we'll get into that. Sandra is asked to answer personal ads watched over by an officer bodyguard played by H.R. Barrett's name of the character, played by George Zucco. By coincidence, she meets the dashing man about town stage review producer Robert Fleming, played by George Sanders. In the meantime, she answers an ad placed by Charles Van Druten, played by Boris Karloff, who is a former fashion designer. Really? Who is now mentally imbalanced. Barrett has to come to her rescue. She also needs to be saved a second time, this time by Fleming, from a mysterious figure named Mr. Moriani, played by Joseph Kalia, who apparently lures young women to South America by offering them a promising opportunity while in reality wanting to recruit them for forced slavery or other forced services. Fleming shares a stately home with Julian Wilde, played by Sir Cedric Hardwicke, his business partner and friend. Fleming ultimately does win Sandra's heart, and they become engaged. Rather quickly, I might add. Inspector Temple thanks her for her efforts, and he plans to attend to come to their engagement party. During the party, however, Sandra accidentally discovers incriminating evidence in Fleming's desk, including a distinctive bracelet that she recognizes as something worn by her friend Lucy and her photograph. Fleming learns that Sandra was an undercover police agent and is placed under arrest. Circumstantial evidence mounts up. His typewriter is identified as the one that was used in the poems, although he adamantly denies any involvement in the crimes. Sandra still loves him and believes that he's telling the truth, but Scotland Yard does not. Fleming refuses to see Sandra, believing that she only pretended to be in love with him in order to trap him, and Lucy's body is later found in the river. Wilde assures his incarcerated friend that he will hire the best attorney and do everything possible to clear him. But it occurs to Inspector Temple that it is Wilde who fancies the poetry and thus is more likely to be the killer. He confronts Wilde, but he has no physical proof, and then learns that Fleming has admitted to the murders, confessed. As Wilde prepares to flee the country, he gets visited by Sandra. He is secretly obsessed with her, as he was with the other woman he's abducted. Wilde at first expresses his desire for Sandra, then removes his scarf and tries to strangle her. Scotland Yard's men, led by Barrett, break through the windows to rescue her just in time. It is revealed that Fleming's confession was faked, part of a scheme by Sandra and Temple to trap Wilde. Fleming is then set free, and he and Sandra make up and toast to better days ahead. Trivia: Alan Napier, best known as Alfred on the Adam West Batman TV series, plays Inspector Gordon in this film. And wouldn't it have been a kick if he had played Commissioner Gordon in the Batman TV series instead? That would have been quite meta. And if you think about it and you look at him as Alfred, and you look at the visual design of Commissioner Gordon in the comics, he would have made a better Commissioner Gordon.
Yes.
So that was quite the interesting thing I was thinking about on that one. Another point, again, while this film is supposedly better than Dark Quarter, it had far worse box office against much fewer box office competitors. Now, of course, the ones that they had were really good. They went up against Danny Kaye's Secret Life of Walter Mitty, Cary Grant and Shirley Temple's Bachelor and a Bobby Soxer, Life with Father, and Adele Mara's Exposed. Now, all those films are vastly superior to Lurid, but when you look at their box office, it is astounding how badly Lurid was trounced. Life with Father got $6.25 million. The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer got $4.5 million. The Secret Life got $3.35 million. Even Exposed, which was really, Adele Mara is a good actress and she's the lead, but the story is really bad compared to this one. It still got $1.8 million compared to the $700,000 that Lurid got. In fact, Lurid didn't even make it into the top 250 grossing films of the year, whereas Dark Corner ranked 239. So that's kind of interesting that they consider this the film that's better between the two. But in a way, it is. We can't say it's not a better story. We can't say that Lucille Ball being the more focal character isn't better. So it's just funny, you know. What I thought though about Tuesday, I gotta tell you, I was sleeping, like trying hard to stay awake type thing when I was watching this. So I was really kind of like punch drunk when I wrote this up. I smirked about 2 seconds into the actual movie, post early credits at the backdrop of London, where you see they had the sign, "Guinness is good for you, gives you strength." Selling the beer. Strength of what? Stupidity the drunker you get? I don't get that one. Talk about false advertising. The guy walking in front of our female victim with the "Murder in Soho Now Playing" sign, which of course was Lucy when she was meeting the killer. But that was a really well done cinematography there. I thought they were going to actually kill her before they actually, I thought she was already going to be dead. I didn't even know that was the character, but it is. The cop opening the mail to Scotland Yard, just tossing him in the random assortment, was kind of silly. How does he know what goes where that quickly? It's like he didn't read the damn thing. How could you even know where to put it? But they did. Then I liked the Scotland Yard's chief's name is Harley Temple. Surely you jest. I never joke about names, and don't call me Shirley. Yes, Chief. That's exactly what I was thinking at the time. So I was like, yeah, so we will no longer go there. It was nice to see them do the earlier era of CSI science to try to identify the killer through the letter and going through all that process, but it was a bit silly that the cops stand around crowding the scientists as they do their work. But I guess we can let that slide. Then I realized I'm only 5 minutes into the film. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to take forever. You can tell how tired I was. Finally, they introduce Lucille Ball's character at 8 minutes and 30 seconds into the movie. And they set up the situation with her friend Lucy. At first, I thought there was a mess up with the dialogue error on Lucille Ball's part because of the quid/pound reference. She was mentioned. I forgot that quid is actually slang for pounds. So I had to, remember that because I thought because the guy had said quid and then she said it was pounds. So I thought, was like, aren't those two different denominations of money? But no, quid is slang. So I thought that Sandra was a bit too concerned for her friend. And then the guy with the cigar interrupting them and her glare at him like, really? And who's the lucky gal this time? That was a brilliant line. So that was funny. I didn't know anything about taxi dancing. Did you?
No, not really.
Yeah, I didn't have any idea what that was. I had to look that up. Apparently, it's just paying a woman to dance with you, which that's kind of crazy in a way. But I mean, I guess it went out of fashion after World War II. But there are still some dance halls where you can do that to this day, which is crazy. But I mean, to me, I don't know. I can't understand that one.
There were a lot of lonely men back then.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying. Maybe it's just because we're of a different generation. We can't understand that because that wasn't part of our lifehood. But imagine if they tried to do that today.
Yeah, well, I think most of the men today that would have been going for those dances back then are now playing video games.
Yeah.
It keeps them, preoccupied.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it strikes me as very odd as well. I can't imagine doing it. But.
Yeah. As the movie progresses and Lucy disappears and Sandra gets involved with Scotland Yard, the story makes you wonder how anybody could believe the premise. After all, Scotland Yard giving an American with no formal police credentials and training, police credentials and a gun, sounds a bit fishy. Would you like chips with that, mate? You can tell I was really out of it when I wrote this. But Ball does a good job in her role. However improbable the events of the story, and they are quite improbable. George Zuko is actually quite charming as the bumbling officer bodyguard H.R. Barrett, as the role is quite the departure from his usual fare of being the nefarious villain, as he's more notably known as Moriarty opposite Batho, Rathbones, Sherlock Holmes, and other villains in horror films. That's what he's mostly known for. The twist of Sandra falling for Fleming and discovering he may be the killer comes too quickly, but then the whole thing with her relationship with him goes much too quickly in this film. I hate how they have people fall in love and get hitched in 20 minutes. It feels like 20 minutes. It's longer, but it goes by so fast. You're like, wait a minute, you just met this person. There's no time for the characters to breathe and learn about each other and relate to one another in these films. And that bothers me, I think. I do think that Wilde was telegraphed as the killer. I think you could easily tell he was the killer right away. But I did like all the red herrings that they tried to do with Boris Karloff being a character actor in this bit as the fashion designer, but not really a suspect because of the reputation of the actor. And the audience is presuming that he's going to be the villain. So it's nice that he's the red herring, I think. And then you have the Moriarty role played by Joseph Callietta. And he did a nice job. And the whole point of him, going to sell young women off to the slave trade. And it's great that Barrett and Fleming I have Barrett coming to rescue twice, but it's actually Barrett and Fleming rescue her. As it seems they could do this shtick forever. However, as she just keeps going, battling every woman-threatening criminal in London, that's kind of how the whole thing kind of felt to me. But yet, they didn't really get anywhere near the truth as to what was actually going on with the killer. So I was like, it was interesting. So it was nice when they brought the twist in on Fleming and made him see, did the red herring as him as the final red herring when we knew it was clearly Wilde. And it was nice that Chief Temple, makes the connection to Wilde, and the whole police crew isn't looking like complete morons because they should have figured it out much sooner. Unfortunately, I do think the whole trap scene at the climax of the film gets a bit overplayed by both Ball and Hardwick, or maybe it's just this whole slow burn of that scene made me roll my all too sleepy eyes because I was struggling not to fall asleep, and I was like, just get it over with. I know what you're trying to do. Get to a point. But the plot here is better than Dark Corner, so I guess it is the better film. It's just overplayed at times as a whole. Recommended for ages 13 up. I give this one 3.5 stars. How about you?
I would give it 4 stars.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie for a lot of reasons.
Okay.
Great character actors. I agree with you that George Zuko, this was an excellent role for him, much different than his normal roles, and he really took to it very well. It's too bad he couldn't do more of these parts, and was always stuck doing mad scientist roles in grade C movies.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling you before the show, I didn't know this movie existed because I go out of my way to try to find all Boris Karloff movies, and I didn't know about this one. So to watch him in a more than a cameo, but not much more than a cameo, for about 10 minutes was pretty funny, and he's also kind of amusing as a kind of just a crazy person.
Well, not just like you said. Yeah, he's a little bit off in the head, but just a fashion designer. Really, him of all people, you cast him as a fashion designer. He's like he would never. He's so. I don't want to say ugly. That's not the right word. He's the last thing you would think of as a fashion designer for a male fashion designer. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, certainly these days he would be. There's no way. So yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, that's I thought was really funny about him being cast as that role.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Great to see him in that as something so different.
And you're right. He played a red herring, and he just, he had nothing to do with it. Though he played a typical British eccentric, and more than eccentric, really. And
yeah.
But a lot of fun to watch the small amount of time he's on screen. And then we have Charles Coburn, one of my favorite character actors. Did I think an above average job here? I really enjoyed his role. His giving, I cannot understand his giving the Lucille Ball character a gun. I mean, his own police force didn't carry guns around, so why he would think it would be acceptable to give? Maybe because it's an American and they think every American is a gun-toting, shooting, man or woman.
Yeah. You have a gun because you're Annie Oakley.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that would have been interesting to see Lucille Ball play Annie Oakley.
Yeah, that would. Yeah,
because Annie Oakley was a redhead, so that would have been interesting.
Yeah. So I think if you want to see Charles Coburn in the role of his career, go see look up the 1952 movie Trouble Along the Way with John Wayne.
Right.
Coburn plays the priest rector of a failing college, and he hires John Wayne's character to get them out of debt by football. It's pretty darn interesting.
Yeah, it is. Pop culture says George Sanders was good as the Falcon in the 1940s.
Yes, he was in, I believe, 4 Falcon. He was also in no, I take that back. He was in 4 Saint movies. He was the Saint, Simon Templar, in 4 movies of the 40s that are really excellent.
Okay.
And then he was good in the Falcon series. I have not seen most of those, but yeah.
Okay. Well, because he was asking, and he says there's maybe a dozen of them, and that you would know about it. So
actually, I think there is something like a dozen. Then I think at some point his brother George Sanders' brother took over as the main character in a movie called The Falcon's Brother. So then the series continued for another bunch of movies, and I don't know how many. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, it, this actually went pretty quickly tonight. I thought it would go a little bit longer.
And
But
I will say that one of the reasons I like this movie much more than the other movie is Lucille Ball is actually the main focus of this movie.
yeah,
She's in most of the scenes, and I think she carries herself very well. I mean, some of her dialogue to get the story moving along doesn't really make sense to any thinking person, but
mhm.
she's generally there. She's quick-witted. She's knowledgeable. She's not afraid. I really liked her character in this
Yeah.
one.
Like I said, I mean, it's so funny because she's supposed to be this American in London, and she has this kind of New York, not swagger, but um, tough gal
Yeah,
attitude.
yeah,
And like I said, when she goes, "Oh, who's the lucky gal this time?" I was just like, "Oh my god!" It's like, "Woo!" you know,
yeah,
but I think about it at that time, and this is the '40s, and I'm like, could women really talk like that without getting, especially in Britain, um, when they can get that kind of snarky at a guy, what would happen? I don't know, because I don't think of it, because I think of the people I knew who were alive in that era, and they never seem to have that kind of feistiness about them, you know.
yeah.
So I was just like, it was kind of weird, because is it really truthful to a woman of that era, or was it just the writer writing, um, you know, testosterone filled woman? Because a lot of guys do that. And sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. This play, I think it plays okay, but like when you have in comics like Chuck Dixon writing Catwoman, and it sounds like a bull dyke lesbian on steroid poisoning, it's not that good. So anyway, Tom Conway was the brother who played the Falcon.
Yes, Tom Conway was actually George Sanders' brother. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that particular series offhand. I'll have to look into that sometime. Northfree says I try to watch everything with Karloff too, and he still hadn't watched this one. He forgot to watch. So go ahead and watch that one when you get a chance, Northfree. I think you'll enjoy it. Like I said, I gave it 3.5. He gives it 4. So it's a pretty reasonably worthwhile time. Okay, that is our show for this evening. I want to thank Monster Fan for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And next week, we're going to go to the 80s, and we're going to go to, I don't know if it's a classic, but it's I guess you call it a palate cleanser after the little more serious roles that films that we've watched, because I'd say the last 2 weeks have been pretty serious films. This is going to be more of a silly science fiction romp, and it's going to be Battle Beyond the Stars. It's Roger Corman time, baby. And it's that's the film with John Boy from Walton's Mountain, Richard Thomas, as the guy who's trying to save his homeworld from a warlord, and has Sybil Danning and George Papard and John Saxon and Robert Vaughn, and just a cast of characters that should be really fun to watch. We got to talk about his ship for sure. But that'll be next week. And until then, as always, I appreciate you watching. If you like this episode, or you think others might, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get content from my channel. And we will see you next time. If you want to reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Lewis.BrightRaven, Twitter at LewisBrightRave2. See some of my artwork at deviantart.com/BrightRaven. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven, exclusively on YouTube. If you have questions, comments, suggestions for films, comics, TV, whatever, Quoth the Raven, LBR72 at gmail.com is the address to reach me at. If I don't get back to you within a day or so, try LewisBrightRaven at yahoo.com. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.